The conference room reeked of stale coffee and corporate desperation. I sat there, watching my boss, Carter Blackwood, swagger around like he owned the world, which, considering his corner office and company Mercedes, he pretty much did. The quarterly review meeting was dragging on, filled with the usual corporate nonsense about synergy and optimization. "Johnson," Carter called out, his voice cutting through the air like a rusty blade. "Why don't you grab me some coffee? Make sure it's fresh this time." I looked up from my notes. 23 years I'd been climbing the ladder at Meridian Financial, working my way up from the loading dock to senior operations manager. I'd earned my stripes, put in the hours, fought for every promotion. But guys like Carter, Harvard MBA, daddy's connections, silver spoon permanently lodged in his throat, they saw me as nothing more than hired help. "Sure thing," I said, keeping my voice level. The other managers around the table avoided eye contact. They knew the drill. Carter liked his little power plays, and I was his favorite target. I walked to the coffee station in the corner, poured a fresh cup from the pot I'd made myself an hour earlier. Black, 2 sugars. I'd memorized how he liked it, much as it pained me to admit. When I returned and set the cup down in front of him, Carter picked it up, took a sip, then made an exaggerated face of disgust. "This tastes terrible," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He leaned forward and spit the coffee back into the cup, right in front of me. "Your wife likes my natural taste better. Maybe you should try developing some." The room went silent. A few nervous chuckles broke the tension, but I heard them like gunshots. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and for a moment, I saw myself grabbing Carter by his expensive tie and introducing his face to the mahogany conference table. Instead, I smiled. "I'll work on that, sir." Carter grinned, clearly pleased with himself. "Good man, Johnson. That's why I keep you around." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The meeting continued, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been trying to ignore for months. Lisa's late nights at the office, her new wardrobe, expensive clothes on an HR director's salary, the way she'd started showering immediately when she came home, claiming she needed to wash off the stress of her day. The natural taste comment wasn't just Carter being his usual arrogant self. It was personal. It was specific. It was him telling me, in front of a room full of our colleagues, that he was sleeping with my wife. After the meeting ended, I sat in my office staring at the wall. 25 years of marriage, 2 kids who'd grown up and moved away, a mortgage we'd finally paid off last year. Lisa and I had been high school sweethearts, married right after graduation. She'd supported me through night school, through the lean years when I was working double shifts to make ends meet. I thought about confronting her directly, but I needed to be sure. Maybe Carter was just being his usual crude self. Maybe I was reading too much into it. That evening, I got home before Lisa, unusual, since she'd been working late almost every night for the past 3 months. I made dinner, set the table, tried to act normal. When she walked through the door at 8:30, she looked surprised to see me. "You're home early," she said, hanging her coat in the closet. She looked good, better than she had in years. New haircut, professional but stylish. A dress I'd never seen before, probably cost more than I made in a week. "Meeting ended sooner than expected," I said. "How was your day?" "Busy. You know how it is." She kissed my cheek, a quick peck that felt more like obligation than affection. "I already ate at the office, working dinner with the executive team." Another lie. I could smell her perfume, not the one I'd bought her for Christmas, something new and expensive. Underneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the scent of cologne. Carter's cologne. I'd smelled it enough times to recognize it. "Which executives?" I asked casually, serving myself from the pot roast I'd made. "Oh, you know, the usual suspects. Carter, Davidson, Williams. quarterly planning stuff. She was good at lying. I had to give her credit for that. Smooth, confident, details that sounded plausible. If I hadn't heard Carter's comment earlier, I might have believed her. Sounds important, I said. Very. Carter's really pushing for some major changes in the HR department. He thinks I have the vision to lead the transformation. Vision. Right. I wondered what other transformations Carter was interested in leading. That night, after Lisa fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My wife of 25 years was having an affair with my boss. The same boss who'd just humiliated me in front of half the company management team. The same boss who'd been making my professional life miserable for the past 2 years since he'd been promoted to VP. I thought about my options. I could confront Lisa, demand the truth, maybe suggest marriage counseling. I could report Carter to HR, though that would be rich, considering he was sleeping with the HR director. I could look for another job, start over somewhere else at 52 years old, or I could do something else entirely. The next morning, I drove to work early and parked across the street from the office building. At 7:15, Carter's red Porsche pulled into his reserved parking spot. At 7:20, Lisa's Honda pulled in 3 spaces away. I watched through my rearview mirror as they met at the elevator, Carter's hand briefly touching the small of her back as they walked inside together. Seeing it with my own eyes was different from knowing it intellectually. It made everything real, immediate, personal. Carter wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was flaunting it. The coffee incident wasn't a one-time thing. It was him marking his territory, showing me exactly how little he thought of me. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes thinking. Then I pulled out my phone and called in sick. First time I'd used a sick day in 3 years, but I needed time to think, to plan. I drove to Kowalski's gym, the old boxing club where I'd been training since my 20s. Frank Kowalski, the owner, was setting up equipment when I walked in. "Little early for you, isn't it, Danny?" Frank was pushing 70 but still built like a brick wall. He'd trained Golden Gloves fighters back in the day, had taught me everything I knew about boxing. "Couldn't sleep," I said, wrapping my hands. "Work troubles?" "Something like that." Frank watched me work the heavy bag for 20 minutes, throwing combinations with more anger than technique. Finally, he called me over. "You want to tell me what's eating you, or do you want to keep beating up my equipment?" I told him everything. Carter, Lisa, the humiliation, the lies. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. "So what are you going to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know. Part of me wants to drive over to Carter's house and settle this the old-fashioned way." Frank shook his head. "That's what he wants. Guy like that, he's counting on you doing something stupid. Then he gets to play the victim, maybe get you arrested, definitely get you fired. Meanwhile, he keeps your wife and you lose everything. So what do you suggest?" Frank smiled, and for a moment I saw the street fighter he'd been before he'd opened the gym. "You want to beat a guy like Carter? You don't use your fists. You use your brain. Find out what he values most, then take it away from him. Make him feel as small as he made you feel." I spent the rest of the morning at the gym, thinking about Frank's words. Carter valued his reputation, his position at the company, his image as the golden boy who could do no wrong. He valued being seen as untouchable, above the rules that applied to everyone else. Maybe it was time to show him that nobody was untouchable. I spent the next week playing the part of the oblivious husband. I smiled when Lisa told me about her late meetings. I nodded sympathetically when she complained about her heavy workload. I even suggested she take a weekend spa trip to relax, an idea she jumped on immediately, probably seeing it as an opportunity for an uninterrupted weekend with Carter. But while I was playing dumb at home, I was gathering information everywhere else. The first break came from an unexpected source. Mina Rodriguez, Lisa's best friend and a senior analyst in the accounting department. Mina and I had never been particularly close. She was Lisa's friend, not mine, but we'd always been cordial at company parties and social events. I ran into her at the coffee shop across the street from our office building on Thursday morning. She was sitting alone at a corner table, looking frustrated as she scrolled through her phone. "Mind if I sit?" I asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. She looked up, startled. "Oh, hi, Danny. Sure, of course." I sat down with my coffee in Danish. "You look like you're having the kind of morning that requires extra caffeine." Mina laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You could say that. Just dealing with some workplace drama. You know how it is." "Actually, I'm not sure I do. What kind of drama?" She hesitated, clearly debating whether to say more. "It's probably nothing. Just office politics. People getting promoted for the wrong reasons, if you know what I mean." I kept my expression neutral. That's frustrating, especially when you work hard and feel like it goes unnoticed. "Exactly." Mina leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I've been with this company for 8 years, Danny. I've never missed a deadline, never had a bad review. But somehow I keep getting passed over for promotions while other people seem to advance based on personal relationships." "Personal relationships?" She glanced around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening. "Let's just say that some people are very good at building relationships with the right executives, very personal relationships." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. Mina was clearly angry about something, and given her friendship with Lisa, I had a feeling I knew what it was. "That must be hard to watch," I said carefully. "It is, especially when it's someone you thought you could trust, someone you considered a friend." Her voice had an edge to it now. "I mean, I understand ambition. I get wanting to succeed. But there are lines you don't cross, you know?" "What kind of lines?" Mina studied my face for a long moment. "Danny, can I ask you something? And please don't take this the wrong way." "Shoot. Are you and Lisa, are things okay between you two?" The question hung in the air between us. I could deflect, change the subject, maintain the pretense that everything was fine. Or I could take a chance that Mina knew something I needed to know. "Why do you ask?" "Because she's been different lately, secretive, and I've seen her with Carter Blackwood more than seems professional." There it was. Confirmation from someone who knew Lisa well, someone who'd been watching the situation develop. "Different how?" I asked. Mina sighed. "New clothes, new attitude. She talks about Carter constantly, how brilliant he is, how much he's teaching her, how he's going to help her career, and the way she looks at him." She shook her head. I tried to talk to her about it, as a friend, reminded her that she's married, that office affairs never end well, but she brushed me off, told me I was being jealous and small-minded. "When was this?" "About a month ago. We haven't really talked since then. She's been avoiding me, actually. I think she knows I disapprove." I nodded slowly. "Mina, what you're telling me, do other people know?" "Some suspect. There's been talk in the break room, you know how it is. People notice when two executives spend a lot of time together behind closed doors, especially when one of them is married. To someone who works at the same company," I added. "Exactly. It's messy, Danny. Really messy. And I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of it." I finished my coffee and stood up. "Thanks for being honest with me. I appreciate it. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet. But whatever I do, I'd appreciate it if you kept this conversation between us." Mina nodded. "Of course. But Danny, be careful. Carter Blackwood is not a nice man. He's charming when he wants to be, but underneath all that charm, he's ruthless. He won't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Thanks for the warning." As I walked back to the office, I thought about what Mina had told me. Lisa and Carter weren't being as discreet as they thought. People were talking, which meant their affair was becoming common knowledge. That could work in my favor, but only if I played it right. I spent the rest of the day observing Carter and Lisa from a distance. During the lunch hour, I positioned myself in the lobby and watched the elevator banks. Sure enough, at 12:30, Carter and Lisa left together, taking separate elevators but clearly coordinating their departure. They returned an hour later, again separately, but I noticed Lisa checking her reflection in the lobby mirrors and Carter straightening his tie. That evening, I told Lisa I was going to stay late to catch up on some paperwork. Instead, I drove to the Marriott downtown, the hotel where our company always booked out-of-town clients and executives. I'd had a hunch, and it paid off. Carter's Porsche was in the parking garage, and through the hotel bar's windows, I could see him sitting at a corner table with Lisa. They weren't discussing quarterly reports. Carter had his hand on Lisa's thigh, and she was leaning into him, laughing at something he'd said. They looked comfortable together, familiar. This wasn't a new development. They'd been doing this for a while. I sat in my car and watched them for 20 minutes. When they got up to leave, instead of heading for the exit, they walked toward the elevators. Carter had his arm around Lisa's waist, and she had her head on his shoulder. I didn't need to see any more. I drove home and was sitting in my recliner, watching television when Lisa walked in at 9:30. "How was your day?" I asked, not looking away from the screen. "Long. Really long. We had a crisis with the Peterson account, and Carter and I had to work through dinner to solve it." "That's dedication," I said. "It's part of the job. You do what you have to do." She kissed the top of my head and went upstairs to shower. I listened to the water running and thought about everything I'd learned. Lisa was lying to my face every single day. Carter was using his position to seduce my wife and humiliate me. And according to Mina, they weren't even trying very hard to hide it. Frank was right. I needed to be smart about this. Emotional reactions would only give Carter more ammunition to use against me. But if I could gather enough evidence, if I could find the right leverage, maybe I could turn the tables on both of them. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to fight back, but I was going to do it on my terms, using my strengths instead of playing to theirs. It was time to show Carter Blackwood what a real fight looked like. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a different person. Not obviously. I still went to work, still came home to Lisa, still maintained the facade of normalcy. But underneath, I was planning, observing, learning everything I could about Carter's vulnerabilities. The man had an ego the size of Texas and the impulse control of a teenager. He couldn't resist bragging about his conquests, his deals, his superiority over everyone around him. And he had a weakness that was going to be his downfall. He trusted the wrong people. I started spending more time at Kowalski's gym, not just for the physical training, but because Frank had connections throughout the city. Guys who'd worked construction, trucking, security, men who saw things, heard things, remembered details that might prove useful. "You're looking better," Frank observed one evening as I finished working the speed bag. "More focused." "I'm feeling more focused." "Good. Anger's like fire. It can warm you up or burn you down. Depends on how you control it." That weekend, while Lisa was at her spa retreat, I did some reconnaissance of my own. Carter lived in an expensive condo complex on the north side, the kind of place that screamed success and disposable income. I drove through the parking garage and spotted his Porsche in its assigned space, along with something interesting. A silver Honda Civic parked in the visitor spot directly next to it. Lisa's Honda Civic. I parked across the street and waited. At 2:30 in the afternoon, they emerged from the building together, Carter's arm around Lisa's shoulders. They were dressed casually, jeans, sweaters, looking like any other couple enjoying a weekend afternoon. Lisa was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months, relaxed and genuinely happy. They drove to an upscale restaurant in Carter's car, leaving Lisa's Honda in the visitor spot. I followed at a distance and watched them through the restaurant window. They held hands across the table, shared food from each other's plates, acted like they were in love. Maybe they were. Maybe this wasn't just a physical affair for Lisa. Maybe she'd convinced herself that Carter represented something better than what she had with me. More excitement, more status, more money. The thought should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it just made me more determined to see this through. On Monday morning, I implemented the first phase of my plan. I'd learned that Carter had a habit of leaving his office door open when he made phone calls, probably because he enjoyed having people overhear how important and connected he was. I made sure to walk past his office several times during the day, and on my third pass, I hit the jackpot. "Told you the Peterson numbers are solid," Carter was saying into his phone, feet up on his desk, leaning back in his chair. "We're talking about a 15% increase in quarterly revenue if we close this deal. The board's going to love it." I slowed my pace, pretending to check my phone while I listened. No, Johnson doesn't know anything about it. Guy's competent enough for day-to-day operations, but he doesn't have the vision for strategic planning. That's why they brought me in. Johnson. That was me. I kept walking, but I'd heard enough. Carter was taking credit for work I'd done, negotiations I'd handled, relationships I'd built over years of careful cultivation. The Peterson account was my baby. I'd landed them as clients 3 years ago, had nursed the relationship through 2 difficult contract renewals, and had been working for months on the expansion deal Carter was now claiming as his own achievement. I walked back to my office and pulled up the Peterson files on my computer. Every email, every meeting note, every piece of correspondence was documented and saved. Carter's name appeared on exactly 3 emails, all of them routine CCs where he'd been included for informational purposes only. I made copies of everything and stored them on a personal flash drive. Then I started thinking about how to use the information most effectively. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. On Wednesday, I overheard Mina talking to another analyst about budget irregularities in Carter's department. Something about expense reports that didn't quite add up, receipts that seemed questionable. I found Mina in the break room that afternoon, making coffee. "How's the workplace drama situation?" I asked casually. She looked around to make sure we were alone. "Getting more interesting by the day. I've been reviewing some expense reports, and let's just say that certain executives have very creative interpretations of what constitutes a legitimate business expense." "Creative how?" "Hotel rooms that cost more per night than I make in a week, restaurant bills that could feed a family of 4 for a month, and always for client meetings that somehow never generate any documentation or follow-up." "That sounds like something the board would want to know about." Mina nodded. "It should be. But when the person approving the expenses is sleeping with the person submitting them, oversight tends to get a little lax." "Lisa's been approving Carter's expenses?" "Among other things. It's amazing how flexible company policy becomes when personal relationships get involved." I filed that information away for future use. Carter wasn't just having an affair with my wife, he was using their relationship to circumvent company financial controls. That was the kind of thing that could end careers, even for golden boys with Harvard MBAs. That evening, I stayed late at the office, waiting until the building was nearly empty. Then I made my way to Carter's office. The door was locked, but I'd learned a few things about locks during my years working in building maintenance before my promotion to management. Carter's office was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture, awards and certificates covering the walls, a bar cart in the corner stocked with premium liquor. His computer was password protected, but his filing cabinets weren't. I spent an hour going through his files, photographing documents with my phone. Expense reports, client files, internal memos, everything that might prove useful later. I was particularly interested in his correspondence about the Peterson account, and I found exactly what I was looking for. Emails where Carter had explicitly taken credit for work he hadn't done, claiming responsibility for strategies he hadn't developed. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed something else. A small digital recorder on Carter's desk, the kind used for dictating notes. On impulse, I checked the device and found several recorded memos, including one from the previous week where Carter discussed his management philosophy. "The key to success in corporate America," his recorded voice said, "is understanding that perception matters more than reality. If people believe you're responsible for positive outcomes, the actual facts become irrelevant." Take the Peterson deal. Johnson did all the grunt work, but I'm the one with the vision to see its real potential. The board doesn't need to know about Johnson's contribution. They just need to know that I delivered results. I copied the recording to my phone and put everything back exactly where I'd found it. As I locked Carter's office and headed for the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Optimism. Carter thought he was untouchable. He thought his charm and connections made him immune to consequences. He was about to learn otherwise. The war was just beginning, and I finally had the ammunition I needed to fight back. The annual company retreat was scheduled for the following weekend at a resort 2 hours outside the city. It was supposed to be a team-building exercise, but everyone knew it was really an excuse for the executives to play golf and drink expensive wine, while the rest of us attended seminars on workplace efficiency. I'd been dreading the retreat for weeks, knowing that Carter would use it as another opportunity to humiliate me in front of our colleagues. But now I saw it differently. A weekend away from the office, with everyone trapped in the same location, could be the perfect setting for what I had planned. The retreat started on Friday evening with a welcome reception in the resort's main ballroom. I arrived early and positioned myself near the bar, nursing a beer and watching as my colleagues filtered in. Lisa arrived with the other HR staff, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before. She gave me a quick wave across the room but didn't come over to talk. Carter made his entrance 20 minutes later, working the room like a politician at a campaign event. He was in his element, charming, confident, the center of attention wherever he went. I watched him interact with the board members, laughing at their jokes, complimenting their wives, playing the part of the perfect executive. "Quite a performance," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Tom Davidson, the CFO, standing with his own drink. Tom was old-school corporate, a numbers guy who'd worked his way up through decades of careful, methodical service. He had no love for flashy executives like Carter. "He's certainly confident," I replied. "Confidence is good. Overconfidence can be dangerous." Tom took a sip of his whiskey. "Especially when it's not backed up by substance." "What do you mean?" Tom looked around to make sure we weren't being overheard. "I've been reviewing some departmental performance metrics lately. Interesting patterns emerge when you dig into the actual numbers versus the reported results." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that certain high-profile successes seem to have been achieved by people other than those taking credit for them." Tom's eyes found Carter across the room. "The Peterson account, for example. Very impressive work, but the documentation tells a different story about who actually did the work." I felt a surge of excitement. Tom had noticed the same discrepancies I'd discovered. That must be frustrating for the people who actually did the work. I imagine it would be. Good work should be recognized and rewarded appropriately. Tom finished his drink. "Enjoy the weekend, Danny. I have a feeling it's going to be very educational." The next morning's schedule included breakout sessions on various business topics. I'd signed up for the financial planning seminar, knowing that Tom would be leading it and that several board members would be attending. Carter, predictably, had chosen the leadership development session, more opportunities to network and show off. During the lunch break, I approached Tom privately. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation last night," I said, "about recognition for good work." "Yes?" "I have some documentation that might interest you, about the Peterson account and a few other projects." Tom raised an eyebrow. "What kind of documentation?" I handed him a folder containing copies of the emails, meeting notes, and recordings I'd gathered. The kind that shows who actually developed the strategies and maintained the client relationships. Tom spent 10 minutes reviewing the materials, his expression growing more serious with each page. Finally, he looked up at me. "This is very thorough, Danny. Very professional. Where did you get the recordings?" "Carter likes to dictate memos. Sometimes he forgets to secure his equipment properly." "I see. And you're bringing this to me because?" "Because I believe in accountability, because good work should be recognized, and taking credit for other people's achievements should have consequences." Tom nodded slowly. I appreciate your commitment to accuracy. Would you be available to discuss this further with the board's audit committee? Absolutely. Good. I'll be in touch early next week. That afternoon, during the golf tournament, I made sure to be visible around the resort, chatting with colleagues, participating in the various activities. I wanted witnesses to my whereabouts, people who could confirm that I was being social and professional. Meanwhile, Carter was on the golf course, playing in a foursome with 3 board members. According to the gossip I picked up from the other participants, he was having a great round, impressing everyone with his game and his conversation. That evening's dinner was a formal affair, with assigned seating and a program of speeches from various executives. Carter was scheduled to give a presentation about innovation in client relations, which I knew would heavily feature his supposed success with the Peterson account. I sat at a table near the back of the room, watching as Carter took the podium. He was polished, charismatic, everything a corporate speaker should be. He talked about vision, about thinking outside the box, about the importance of building personal relationships with clients. Take our recent success with Peterson Industries, he said, clicking to a slide showing impressive revenue figures. When I took over that account, it was underperforming, stagnant. But by applying innovative relationship-building strategies and thinking creatively about their needs, we were able to increase their business by 15% in just 6 months. The audience applauded. Several board members nodded approvingly. Carter was selling his fiction perfectly, and everyone was buying it. The key, Carter continued, is understanding that in today's competitive environment, technical competence isn't enough. You need vision, leadership, the ability to see possibilities that others miss. That's what separates true executives from mere managers. More applause. I noticed Lisa at a table near the front, beaming with pride as she watched Carter speak. She believed in him completely, bought into his version of events as thoroughly as everyone else. After Carter finished his presentation, there was a brief networking reception. I watched as board members approached him to offer congratulations, as colleagues praised his insights and vision. He was riding high, completely convinced of his own invincibility. I waited until the crowd around him thinned, then approached. Great presentation, I said, extending my hand. Carter shook it, his grip firm and confident. Thanks, Danny. I appreciate that. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I hope you understand that everything I do is for the good of the company. Oh, I understand perfectly. You're very good at seeing the big picture. Exactly. That's what leadership is about. Seeing possibilities, taking initiative, making things happen. Speaking of making things happen, I said, lowering my voice. I had an interesting conversation with Tom Davidson earlier. He was very impressed with the Peterson account documentation. Carter's smile faltered slightly. Documentation? You know, the emails, meeting notes, client correspondence, the paper trail that shows how the relationship developed over time. Tom's very thorough when he reviews these things. I'm sure he is. He mentioned something about presenting his findings to the audit committee next week. Should be very educational. Carter's face had gone pale. What exactly are you saying, Danny? I smiled, the same polite smile I'd been giving him for 2 years. I'm saying that documentation is important. Facts matter. And sometimes the truth has a way of coming to light, even when people try to keep it buried. I walked away, leaving Carter standing alone by the bar. As I headed back to my room, I felt better than I had in months. The weekend wasn't over yet, but the real show was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel possible. I got to the office early, as usual, but there was an energy in the building that felt different. People were talking in hushed tones, clustering in small groups that dispersed when anyone in management walked by. The first sign that my plan was working came at 9:30, when Tom Davidson's assistant called to schedule a meeting for that afternoon. The second sign came an hour later when I noticed Carter hadn't come in yet, unusual for someone who normally arrived by 8 to make sure everyone saw how dedicated he was. Lisa seemed distracted during our brief encounter at the coffee station. She was checking her phone constantly, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked like anxiety. "Everything okay?" I asked, playing the concerned husband. "Fine. Just some work issues that need sorting out." She didn't meet my eyes. "Carter's dealing with some complications from the retreat. Board stuff. Nothing serious, I hope." "I'm sure it'll work out. Carter's very good at handling difficult situations." I nodded sympathetically. I'm sure he is. At 2 o'clock, I knocked on Tom Davidson's door. He was sitting behind his desk with several other people I recognized: Margaret Chen, the head of the audit committee, Robert Williams, the general counsel, and Sarah Mitchell, the VP of Human Resources and Lisa's direct supervisor. "Danny, thanks for coming," Tom said. "Please, have a seat." I sat down in the chair facing the group, feeling like I was either about to be promoted or terminated. Given the circumstances, either seemed possible. "We've had a chance to review the materials you provided," Margaret said, consulting a thick folder. "Very comprehensive documentation. We have some questions." For the next hour, they walked me through everything: the Peterson account development, the client relationship management, the strategic planning that had led to the expanded contract. I answered their questions honestly, providing additional details when asked, clarifying timelines and responsibilities. "According to your records," Robert said, "you were the primary contact for Peterson Industries for the past 3 years. That's correct. And you developed the expansion strategy that resulted in the 15% revenue increase?" "Yes, working with their procurement team and our operations staff." But at the company retreat, Carter Blackwood presented this work as his own achievement. "That's what I observed, yes." Sarah leaned forward. "Danny, I have to ask, what prompted you to bring this to Tom's attention? This kind of situation could have been resolved through normal HR channels." I'd been expecting this question. I tried to address it through normal channels initially, but given the personal relationship between Carter and my wife, I felt that HR might not be the most objective forum for resolving the issue. The room went quiet. Sarah's expression hardened. "Personal relationship? I believe Carter and Lisa are having an affair, have been for several months." Robert and Margaret exchanged glances. Tom nodded grimly. "We suspected there might be additional complications." "What kind of complications?" I asked. "Expense report irregularities," Margaret said. "Hotel charges, restaurant bills, travel expenses that don't align with documented business activities, all approved by Lisa in her capacity as HR director. We've also discovered some concerning patterns in performance evaluations and salary recommendations," Sarah added. "Lisa has been very generous in her assessments of Carter's contributions, while being notably critical of other employees' work." "Other employees like me?" "Among others, yes." I felt a surge of vindication mixed with anger. It wasn't just about the affair. Lisa had been actively sabotaging my career to benefit Carter's. "What happens now?" I asked. Tom closed the folder in front of him. "Now we conduct a formal investigation. Carter and Lisa will be interviewed separately. We'll review all relevant documentation and expense reports. Depending on what we find, there could be disciplinary action up to and including termination. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you continue doing your job. The Peterson account will be officially reassigned to you, along with appropriate recognition and compensation adjustment. Carter will be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation," Margaret added. "Lisa will be transferred to a different department to avoid any appearance of impropriety." I nodded, trying to process everything. "How long will the investigation take?" 2 weeks, maybe 3, Robert said. "We'll be thorough but efficient." As I walked back to my office, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd gotten what I wanted. Carter was going down. Lisa's betrayal was exposed, and my professional reputation was being restored. But I also realized that my marriage was over. My life was about to change dramatically, and I wasn't sure how I felt about any of it. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of whispered conversations and meaningful looks from colleagues. Word was spreading quickly through the office grapevine, and by 5 o'clock, everyone seemed to know that something significant was happening. I stayed late, catching up on actual work and avoiding the inevitable confrontation with Lisa. But eventually, I had to go home. She was waiting for me in the living room, still in her work clothes, her face streaked with tears. "They suspended him," she said as soon as I walked through the door. "Carter's been suspended pending investigation." I heard. "They're saying he falsified reports, took credit for other people's work. They're saying he stole money from the company." "Did he?" Lisa looked at me like I'd slapped her. "How can you ask that? You know Carter. He's brilliant. He's honest. He would never—" "I know Carter humiliated me in front of our colleagues. I know he's been taking credit for my work for months. And I know he's been sleeping with my wife." The words hung in the air between us. Lisa's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, anger, and finally, resignation. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Long enough." "Danny, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you've been sabotaging my performance reviews while inflating his? Can you explain why you threw away 25 years of marriage for a guy who's probably done this with half the women in the company?" Lisa started crying again, but there was anger mixed with the tears now. "You don't understand. Carter and I, what we have, it's not just some cheap affair. We connect on a level that you and I never did. He sees my potential. He believes in me. He used you, Lisa. He used you to steal from the company, to undermine other employees, to cover his own incompetence. And when this investigation is over, he's going to throw you under the bus to save himself." "That's not true." "We'll see." I walked upstairs and started packing a bag. Lisa followed me, alternating between apologies and accusations, between begging me to understand and blaming me for destroying her life. "Where are you going?" she asked as I zipped up my suitcase. "Hotel for now. My lawyer will be in touch about divorce proceedings." "Danny, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can start over." I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. "Lisa, you made your choice months ago. You chose him over me, chose your ambition over our marriage, chose to lie to me every single day rather than have an honest conversation about what you wanted. I'm just finally accepting the reality you created." I carried my bag downstairs and headed for the door. Lisa followed, still talking, still trying to find some combination of words that would fix everything. But there are some things that can't be fixed, some betrayals that can't be forgiven, some choices that can't be undone. As I drove away from the house we'd shared for 15 years, I thought about Frank's advice. Find out what your enemy values most, then take it away from them. Carter had valued his reputation, his position, his sense of invincibility. I'd taken all of that. Lisa had valued her career advancement, her relationship with Carter, her image as a successful professional. She was about to lose all of that too. And me? I'd valued my marriage, my trust in my wife, my belief that hard work and loyalty mattered. I'd lost those things, but I'd gained something else. The knowledge that I wasn't the weak, ineffectual man Carter thought I was. I was someone who could fight back, who could win, who could make people pay for underestimating him. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was the ending I'd earned, and sometimes that has to be enough. 3 weeks later, the investigation concluded. Carter was terminated for falsifying reports and misappropriating company funds. Lisa was demoted and transferred to a different division, her career prospects effectively destroyed. I was promoted to Carter's old position, with a significant salary increase and formal recognition for my work on the Peterson account. Carter never found another job at his previous level. Last I heard, he was working for a small consulting firm, making a fraction of his former salary. Lisa and I divorced quietly, splitting our assets and going our separate ways. I still train at Kowalski's gym. Frank still gives advice about fighting smart instead of fighting angry. And sometimes, late at night, I think about natural taste and what it really means to win.